What is going on, everybody? The week is finally here. We are 6 days away from the Eagles battling it out with Patrick Mahomes and the Kansas City Chiefs for the Super Bowl. Welcome back to the Phaithful Phanatics show, guys. I'm one half your host, Dylan Davis. To my right, my faithful co-host, Scotty. If you guys are new to the channel, do yourself a favor, do us a favor. Make sure to check us out on Twitter first at DSM_Media is where you can find us. Smash that follow button and then check out the link tree in our bio. It will take you to every social media platform we are available on. If you guys want to get your comments and questions pulled up like this on the screen and be interactive with us throughout tonight's show or any of our live streams, make sure to check out the YouTube channel specifically. That's it right here on the screen. Smash that subscribe button, like the video, share it with your friends, family, any other Eagles or Philly sports fans that you know of that might like the content. We appreciate each and every one of you. My man, it's finally here. We get to get more in depth with our breakdowns, with our previews. Friday show, if you guys missed it, if you're a loyal listener, you know we broke down the two rosters, compared the position groups and where the Eagles match up with this Chiefs team in 2024. Basically, that got me and Scotty thinking. I know some other people have been talking about it, on the radio, on television as well. Is this the greatest Eagles team ever? Already, win or lose, is this the best, most talented Eagles team of all time? And then we got to thinking about previous Super Bowl teams, other teams that may be underachieved. So later on in the show, throughout the show, we're going to get into our top 5 greatest Eagles team of all time and see where this one lists. But my man, happy Monday, and what is going on?
Yes, sir. Happy Monday. What's good, Martian, in the comments as well. Definitely going to talk that on the NBA NBA pod later for sure. But yeah, man, it's an exciting week. Obviously, we're finally here. I'm excited to get to the game. I know we're going to have this whole week of like talking about the game. We're going to get the whole media week, all of that. We'll get the nice interviews and stuff, but I'm just juiced to get this game on and get on the field and see what these guys are about. But I guess I shouldn't rush it away, man. This is the last week of football overall. Yep. I'll be honest, I didn't watch a second of the Pro Bowl stuff.
No.
Did not have a care in the world. So yeah, football season's wrapping up. So that's kind of the downside of things, no matter what. There's going to be no more football on Sundays, but nonetheless, we're in the biggest game of the year, and we're going to have this week to get excited about it and be optimistic. After this
right?
Week,
Exactly.
We'll know what's going down. Yeah. So let's just enjoy it, my man.
Yeah, no, I agree, man. Like at the end of the day, you do just want to get here. It's almost like you just want to get it over with, because I don't know that my heart can take this 60 minutes, right? But it's not familiar. It's not too familiar air to be involved in this week, right? We've only seen a handful of Super Bowl performances in our lifetime, and obviously generations before that struggled to see anything else, right? So let's enjoy it. Let's talk about it as much as we can, because once this week has gone by, we have months and months and months to get into hypotheticals, and we'll be wishing we only had a week of hypotheticals to get into, which is what we can do with this one. But it's going to be a lot of fun, man. But let me ask you this, point blank period, straight off the rip. Win or lose, is this the greatest Eagles team of all time? And when I say greatest, I mean, you kind of mean talented, win or lose, right? Because when there is a team 7 years ago that has hoisted a Lombardi, it's difficult to say that if this team loses, they're the greater football team. But are they the best football team we've ever had in this city?
It's such a tricky question when you phrase it that way, but my heart says 2017, man, and it's just a matter of winning the biggest game of the season. There was a magic about that season when you look back on it, especially with what happened in 2022.
Yeah,
I do get it. It's Saquon versus like Foles, right? Like it's Hurts versus Foles. It's Saquon versus Blount.
So if they win,
Ajayi, right? Corey
even
Clement.
If they win, you're going with 2017.
Or no. If they win, if they play the way they've played all season, they will be the best team in Eagles history for my money. Okay. So yeah, I guess to answer your question, Yeah, they're more talented. Yeah, for sure. I think that's the basis here at the end of the day to your question. This team is more talented. I guess it's just measuring talent versus execution. You know what I mean? All of the intangibles that go along with it. That 2017 team, I don't want to forget how good they really were. Like how good Alshon and
I'm glad you bring that up,
were
man.
down that stretch. You know what I mean?
Yep.
Foles, how great Foles was in that
that's
Super
the thing,
Bowl.
Right, because we're talking about like Super Bowl team.
Yeah.
The guys that were on the field for that Super Bowl, but that doesn't tell the whole story of 2017.
Right.
You know, in 2022, you had an MVP caliber season from your quarterback. In 2017, you had that almost like on steroids, right? And you had a lot of other injuries. You had maybe arguably the greatest left tackle of all time go down in that season, right? You had your starting middle linebacker go down. You had a guy in Darren Sproles go down. Like, so that 2017 season is so weird and so magical because it's almost like the team that played in the playoffs and in the Super Bowl in those 60 minutes is somewhat separate of the regular season and how dominant those guys were as well. Because, dude, people do get it twisted. I'll come out and say this. Of the 5 teams I have listed, I have the 2022 Philadelphia Eagles as number 5. Obviously, that sounds like a knock on them. I'm calling them the 5th greatest team I've ever witnessed in my lifetime and beyond, right? But it's further than just this year, man. In that 2017 year, you have the Wentz regular season, you have the Foles magical carpet ride, and maybe the greatest quarterbacking Super Bowl ever, right? People forget about that running game. Like, it's not Saquon Barkley, right? Like, if the Eagles win, that's why they jump ahead. But you had a LeGarrette Blount who you acquired in that offseason who was phenomenal. Darren Sproles before he got injured. A rookie undrafted in Corey Clement who made big plays in the Super Bowl. And at the deadline, you went out and got Jay Ajayi, who at the time was a big name in that backfield. So that three-headed monster was ridiculous. The offensive line was ridiculous. To D-Rap's point, Brandon Brooks was over at right guard between Jason Kelce and Lane Johnson. Like, that was gross, right? Defensively, like, people talk about that 2022 team with all those sacks. Man, we had Ndamukong Suh and Linval Joseph chasing around Patrick Mahomes in the Super Bowl. You had a prime, maybe a little past prime Fletcher Cox, right around that time for Fletcher.
He was still performing. Correct. He was still performing at a high level, but still not as good as his prime. To your point,
right. You acquired a Timmy Jernigan that year, who was maybe not Javon Hargrave of 2022, but a very good defensive tackle for this team, right?
Yeah.
You had Jordan Hicks who went down, who was probably better than TJ Edwards was. Like, if you take them regular season 2017, 2018.
Yeah, playmaking.
Jordan Hicks was probably a little bit better than TJ Edwards. You had Malcolm Jenkins. You had Rodney McLeod. So, yeah, I think that people sleep on the 2017 season, man.
Yeah, I do too.
He did say this.
Because you know the 2017 team gets thrown in there, and they get thrown in with like magic and the whole storylines, and rightfully so. I think the big storyline that we haven't even hinted at is that it was our first win in the Super Bowl. So like that's going to hold significant weight in itself. Just like the whole mantra, the narrative, right? Nick Foles stepping in, you have Carson Wentz, so. Yeah, I think this team this year, man, when you look across the board, though, you had dogs on that team, but you didn't have superstars, if that makes sense. Let me tread lightly there. Well, didn't have superstars. They had superstars. They didn't have the superstars at the skill positions outside of Ertz. Ertz was a star.
And man.
The O-line was a star.
Edition. Like, Alshon. Like, Alshon's not.
His numbers weren't booming, right? But his moments.
But Alshon Jeffrey was a huge addition at that time. Yeah, man.
I loved Alshon. He's one of my favorite wide receivers.
By the way, when we get through all these teams, 22 this year, who both have AJ, 17 when you acquired Alshon that season. There's another team that's on my list that you acquired, one of the greatest wide receivers of all time. That's a pretty significant piece of these Super Bowl run teams, going out and getting a difference maker like that. I do want to say I messed up. I wasn't looking at the list when I said it. 2022 is not number 5 for me. It's number 4.
Okay.
It's not 5 out of 5.
Yeah, that makes sense.
5 for me.
That makes sense.
I do. Well, again, we'll keep circling back to this team 2024 because that's the, core of this conversation. I will say at number 5 for me, I had probably the most underachieving team of my lifetime. Like kind of the whole era is underachieving. But I chose specifically the 2010 team that went to the playoffs and
I do
lost
feel that though.
that year. Michael Vick putting up MVP type of numbers. The duo of Deshaun Jackson and Jeremy Maclin. Before Saquon Barkley, the greatest running back in Eagles history, and LaShawn McCoy. You had some players and difference makers on defense. Like Asante Samuel Jr., like is one of the greatest corners we've ever had. One of the biggest, one of the biggest playmakers we've ever had, right? I'm drawing blanks at who else was on the bat. You had was this prime Trent Cole 2010? 10 sacks in that season specifically in 15 games played. So yeah, it's not the best defense we've had. It's not the best offense we've had in totality, but they were definitely the most underachieving and I guess star-studded, and that's why I put them there.
What year was the Dream Team?
That was 2011. That's why
2011, the year after.
I was going it like that is like that's the more talented name on defense. Like they went out and got Jason Babin and Colin Jenkins, and that's Namdi and that's DRC. Like, dude, that fucking offseason was insane, but that team stunk. Like it was so underachieving. at least the previous year, that Vic era went to the playoffs and I believe we hosted Green Bay that year, so that means we won the division. So that's like it's that era is what I'm hinting at is my number 5. Vic, McCoy, Jackson, Maclin era.
No, I do feel that, and I would put that group somewhere in my top probably 7 or 8.
Yeah.
Just because it was memorable, regardless of why it was memorable. It was memorable. And I think that's where this other team comes into play as well. It's more of like it was so heartbreaking that it sticks with me to this day.
Yeah.
And it was the 2008 Eagles team, man. They got to the NFC.
Yeah,
they got to the NFC Championship against the Arizona Cardinals, and Larry Fitzgerald ripped our hearts out.
Yes,
Donovan McNabb balled out in this game, by the way. He had like 375 passing yards in this game, 3 tutties.
I remember Selleck had like a ridiculous touchdown up the middle, like breaking the tackle.
Selleck had a tutty.
Ejax had a big tutty in this one.
Ejax had a tutty.
Yeah.
No, it was kind of a fluke season, Martian, but you make it to the NFC Championship with like an 11-7 record that year. I was bought in at that point. Like, you're one step away from the Super Bowl. Fuck it, let's just go see what happens. And Larry Fitzgerald didn't even let us get that far, man. But that one sticks with me. The other one that didn't make the list, man, that I would put in the category of these teams we're talking about right now, is that year. I don't know if you remember it, man. It might be before your time. I'm kidding. It was the Jeff Garcia season where he had to step in, bro. And we ended up going down to New Orleans, I think, and we lost in New Orleans with Jeff Garcia at quarterback. And I remember going up to the top of my steps at my house and crying that night when we lost that one. So that one sticks with me as well, man. I don't know what year that was, though, exactly. But yeah, those are some of you look back on it now, it's like, damn, these teams maybe weren't that good, when you look at what you're producing now in this team.
Not at all. I was going to say, that is the Kevin Curry.
Oh no, we lost Dylan. You guys know how this goes. Oh man, can we get him? Let's see if we can get him off the screen. You guys know how that goes. So once he hops back in, I'll hop out and we'll do this whole charade here. But yeah, those were like the teams that. I don't want to say those are the teams that made me a fan. No, I was a fan before the 2008s and the 2007s. I would say like the 2002-ish seasons, 2002, 2001, right when McNabb was really getting integrated in the NFL and making his mark. Andy Reid really, really starting to get it going. So that's when I really started to become a fan. But obviously, one of the teams from that earlier era in the early 2000s makes higher on this list of top 5. But that 2008 team, yeah, Marcia, you're not lying. It was a suspect team, but it was fun, right? And I think the bigger thing is just that era, and I think it's kind of what Dylan was getting at as well. Yeah, exactly. That's the team that I was ultimately talking about, Martian. That 2004 team. You could argue T.O. healthy. I don't know. It's hard to compare historically if that team would be better than this 2024 team, but that team was nasty. That defense was nasty. One of my favorite, if not my favorite, defense ever. And obviously, we got a great defense now. We'll see how this finishes out. They could finish in that conversation. But when you talk about the Brian Dawkins, and that's the thing with that whole Dante Stallworth, man, I do remember Dante Stallworth. Very, very slept on. And that's when, I feel like I was like begging for wide receivers when we had Dante Stallworth. So I was like hype when we ended up picking him up. But more or less, like you talk about the 2014, it's kind of that era, but I feel like more of my adolescence, my era really was like the Andy Reid into what? Like the Chip Kelly and so on. Like that was my era of really getting into it. Probably like the 2006, 2005 and on. So that 2008 team sticks out. 2010 team that Dylan mentioned with Djax and Jeremy Maclin, like those teams stick in my head as well because I'm really upset Djax didn't get anything while he was here. Obviously, McNabb, B-Dog, some of the Eagles greats that ended up with no rings with our franchise. You read some of these comments here. 08 was so much fun when we took the lead on that Djax tutty. I thought we were going to the Super Bowl. Same, bro. Same. Oh my God. And I think that's why it sticks with me is because it's moments, man. It's the feelings that are involved in those moments in those big games. So the bigger the letdown, the more you're going to kind of remember and sensationalize that moment. So I think that is why that loss to Arizona sticks out in my memory so much. All right, let's see here.
Oh,
He's in. I'm gonna hop out really quick here. Let's see if this works.
Oh no, dude. How does this constantly happen? And what's messed up about it is, don't worry, I was tuned into the conversation while I was off, but what's messed up about it is normally my Wi-Fi bar will like drop on my StreamYard and I could tell it's happening or about to happen. I rambled on for like another 20 seconds, I guess, when you guys couldn't see me. Because I didn't even know I was off until Scotty said, oh no, we lost Dylan. And then I switch it over to the laptop simply because I don't feel like dealing with it and having to keep restarting the Mac tonight. And then, of course, we lost Scotty for a second, somehow, some way. So, yeah, we'll get him back in. But I was listening. The 08 team, Scotty, like, because at what point, I guess the question becomes, like, Marsh, and I'll ask you right now, like, at what point does the question or the resume have to like be accomplishments? Like, I included the 2010, 11, like the Vic era, because I do think they are one of the more underwhelming teams that we've ever had, right? All that talent on offense, all the explosive plays. But you aren't wrong. The offensive line wasn't that good. What year we drafted Danny Watkins? 2012, 2013, something like that. You had a fireman playing left guard. You had a lot of shit going on. Then the defense, you had some players, but they overall weren't a very talented unit. I did hear Scotty get into 04, and I kind of want to wait for him to get back in here because. So I'll just give you guys a little preview here. I do think that this Eagles team this year is the greatest Eagles team of all time. If they lose Scotty's right. It's very difficult to argue against the 2017 team, the one team that got it done. And it's not like that team, played Joe Burrow and the Bengals that year, and they missed the dynasty. Like that, like just as much as we're playing a dynasty and going against one of the greatest quarterbacks and head coach duos of all time, that's what 2017 accomplished as well. Probably against the greatest head coach and quarterback duo of all time. So if they aren't able to come away with a win, I don't even want to get into that right now, but if they aren't able to do it, it's very difficult to say that 2017 isn't the greatest team of all time. But I think just as even with the 2017 team and arguably more talented, just like this team might be more talented on paper aside from the accomplishment, that 2004 team was legit, like really, really legit. And I think it gets foggy because in the early 2000s when we were getting to all those NFC championships, and I was a young kid at this point. I mean, I was 6 when the Super Bowl took place. But we think of the Freddie Mitchells and the Todd Pinkstons and the James Thrashes and that wide receiving core. And that's not what this offense was this year in 2004. There he is. We good. Can you see me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Right. We're all good. We're all good. I was listening while I was cut out, and I was just getting back to the 04 team because I wanted to wait with you to have this conversation.
Yeah.
Because I was basically saying, at what point do like the accomplishments matter, right? So if we're unable to finish the job this Sunday, it's very difficult to argue that the 2017 team isn't the greatest because they got the job done and they beat a dynasty in doing so, right?
Yeah.
But aside from that, I do think that this team is the greatest team we've ever seen. And I think that 2004 team is the second greatest team I've ever seen, right? Like Super Bowl win aside, that like you talk about the acquisition of Terrell Owens, dude. Like, what's T.O.? A top 5 wide receiver of all time in that conversation, right? So, and I mean, we're talking like prime Terrell Owens, right? So,
yeah, I mean, you can argue Terrell Owens is in that small conversation that you can argue that he's like the greatest talented. Ever.
Like the most talented wide receiver.
Yeah, that's what I mean. Like not necessarily greatest statistically, but you can put him up against most wide receivers on any given on a very peak season, right? Yeah. I do agree. You look at talent at every level that season.
Yeah.
So, similar to this one.
Right, correct. And you go back and so you have the wide receiver one, right? You have arguably the best in the game at that point. Up until this point, until Jalen does win one, Donovan's at that point, you probably have the greatest Eagles quarterback of all time. Before LaShawn and Shady, there was B West, who we grew up with. Now I know there's some old heads out there that'll go way, way back to times I don't know and don't remember, and they'll get into some of the older names, and they may be right. But Brian Westbrook, arguably top 5 Eagles running back of all time, right? It could be top 4, top 3, it's depending on some. So you have the wide receiver one, you have a talented running back, you have the best quarterback of our franchise's history, and then you get to the defensive side of the ball. And this is where that core really was, but it's where the TO addition became so evident, man, because, dude, you go to the second level and the third level of this defense, now I want to make sure I get this right. Maybe it's just Pro Bowl, but so on Pro Football Reference, there's an asterisk next to some of these names. And the asterisk says Pro Bowl, comma, plus first team All-Pro. So I'm assuming they were first team All-Pro players.
Okay.
Lito Shepard, Michael Lewis, and Brian Dawkins all have asterisks next to their names, as does Jeremiah Trotter. So you're 3 out of their 4 secondary players were Pro Bowlers and all-team first pros. Their middle linebacker was a Pro Bowler and first team All-Pro. And then you had Javon Curse and Corey Simon and big boys up front as well.
Yeah.
One of the greatest Eagles defenses to ever do it. The best quarterback in franchise history, a top 5 running back in franchise history, and arguably the most talented wide receiver to ever play the game. One of the most talented to ever play the game. Yeah, that's a pretty good fucking team. And oh, by the way, they lost to the same, somehow, 13 years apart, lost to the same dynasty and quarterback and head coach that, we're talking about beating in 17.
Yeah, no, it's a great point especially when you go position by position like that. It really shows, especially that 2004 team was definitely better than that 2022 team. I think that's one place we can go. Let me throw this to you though. Obviously, on the offensive end, we can match that 2004 team with star power. Like obviously, Saquon, AJ, and Smitty, and Goddard, so on and so forth. Blah blah blah. Offensive line, defense. These players are really good, and the thing is, Bond hasn't had a chance to be a multi-year All-Pro with the Eagles. Cooper DeJean hasn't had a chance to staple himself in as an Eagles all-time favorite. Quinyon Mitchell as an Eagles all-time favorite corner, although their trajectory based on this season says that they will be that. And we could look back on this, once again, if they win, as that moment that really, really solidified or projected or trajected them into greatness as an Eagle. Do you know what I mean? Like we could look back on them, and maybe we look back, and I'm just throwing an example out there. This doesn't have to be true at all. Like, but maybe we look back and Cooper DeJean becomes like a Weapon X level of talent on the football field. Not saying that's going to happen. I'm not projecting that. I'm not predicting that. I'm just using it as maybe Jalen Carter is a better example, right? Jalen Carter could end up being better than Fletcher Cox, than a Corey Simon. Like that's what we're looking at here. So I do think maybe the defense gets the short end of the stick this season just because of name value coming into the season.
Absolutely. No, I wholeheartedly agree. And that's why it's so tough. And it gets you excited because it's almost like they're not ahead of schedule because they were just in a Super Bowl 2 years ago with this quarterback head coach. And, the expectations coming into last year and this year and the next year are going to be championship level expectations. Yeah. But when you run through the jump, man, like Scotty, think about this for a second. Like Vic Fangio gets 50% of the credit and these young kids get 50% of the credit because this defense, more specifically, this passing defense, man, was 31st and third. Like, they were the worst. They were so bad last year. They're first and second in every statistical category this season. Think about that jump. Think about the 12-month gap we're in right now. They went from last to first in almost every single statistic category that you can come up with on the defensive side of the ball. Add on to it the greatest rushing, the greatest season a running back might ever have, right? Yeah. Add on to it a top 5 wide receiver in the game. Add on to it the best offensive line in football, an underappreciated quarterback, one of the best wide receiver 2s in the game. Like, this team is fucking stacked, man. They really are. And that you are right. Like, they don't have the cachet and they don't have the time and experience yet to compare side by side with Brian Dawkins, with Axeman.
Right.
Like, they don't have
that holds weight.
Yes.
Yeah. To your point, Trotter as well. The Axeman holds a lot of weight.
Lito Shepherd, brother. Lito Shepherd had 5 picks that year and was a first-team All-Pro.
Bro, Lito Shepherd, Darius Slay. He's about to play in his second Super Bowl as an Eagle.
Yep.
Where does that put him, like, all time as an Eagles corner? Like, I don't know. Maybe that's not a fair way to, like, examine the players, like, by Super Bowl trips, but I think it says something that Darius Slay has been in 2 Super Bowls with the Philadelphia Eagles.
And I'll take it a step further to kind of reel it into this year in 22, because I do want to kind of get to that conversation, and that's where we can start to get towards the end of the show, is comparing the last go round versus Kansas City versus this go round, because I think this is where the conversation has started, at least nationally. Like, just talking about the 22 team versus this team and how great that team was. I don't think the 2022 team was better than some of these teams we're talking about right now. And more specifically this one, but you mentioned Super Bowl trips, and it's very difficult outside of like quarterback, right? It's very difficult to talk about a corner or a linebacker or someone like that, being the multiple trips, because how much weight does it hold and everything?
Yeah, it's fair.
Head coach.
Yeah.
Now we're going against a better head coach. And that better head coach was our head coach once upon a time. And that head coach coached in multiple NFC championship games and that Super Bowl of that 2014 we're talking about. But I'll argue that Andy Reid in Philadelphia, because let's not get this twisted, man. As much championship level success we had during Andy Reid's time here, Andy Reid was not Andy Reid until he moved on to Kansas City and Patrick Mahomes became a Chief.
Yeah.
Andy Reid wasn't looked at as one of the greatest head coaches of all time before Patrick Mahomes started winning Super Bowls. And that's not to diminish Andy Reid. But I might agree with Martian in terms of Eagles tenure. That might be the list. And if it is, it's only Doug because of the win. If Nick wins the Super Bowl, Nick Sirianni fucking leapfrogs Doug Peterson by a country mile in terms of Philadelphia head coaches.
Yeah, and I think this is fair for Nick versus Andy right now because Nick is going to his second Super Bowl, right?
Correct.
So, like, even if he loses this, it's not great to have 2 Super Bowl losses, but 2 Super Bowl trips is better than 1. The other thing I'll say that gives Andy, once again, it's similar to like the name value, right? But that's when I became a fan, was when Andy Reid was head coach. And so that's always going to be that origin. You know what I mean? That safe space at the beginning of my fandom. But I think that what I'm trying to say is I think that's why Andy holds like so much weight with our fan base. But at the same time, he turned us into a successful organization, right?
The knock is, he never got it done. The knock on 5 is he never got it done. In the big game, he never got it done.
It got us on our way, I guess. I mean,
brother, he played in 5 total NFC championship games in Philadelphia?
Yeah.
1 for 4 is not, it's not good enough, and it's not good, and that's the knock on you. And he threw up in the huddle in the Super Bowl, and you got the back and forth with him and T.O. and everything. But the knock is not getting the job done. Nick has to go get it done. My point kind of leading into this was, we look at these players and we look at this roster and they get all the credit in the world, as they should. But this head coach needs to start getting some of that fucking credit. Because, Scott, it's not even just the players getting the credit. It's his coordinators now. It's Vic Fangio and Kellen Moore getting all the credit. It's Howie Roseman. And they all deserve credit as well. And it's Jeffrey Lurie for being a great owner. Yeah, you're right. But how does everyone else get fucking credit except the head coach of the football team?
Yeah. No, I completely agree, man. And it's so funny when we look at like the way this season started, and that's the biggest part of it, is that people can't swallow their pride and just admit that they were wrong about the guy. Because I came on here and was blatantly wrong in the way I spoke about Nick Sirianni.
I told you in week 4.
We both were.
3.
We both
I would fire him.
But Matt, like, this is what I was sitting here thinking as you were talking, man. Could you imagine if Andy Reid, like the Andy Reid era, but in this social media era,
right?
Like if it matched up, like Andy wouldn't have survived that long in Philadelphia to even get to like that Deshaun Jackson tenure or era.
No.
So like the way Nick Sirianni is talked about, like, do we think we would like Andy Reid?
Right now, no.
His non-emotion, he's very kind of stale. Like, I don't know. I don't know if we would really like it.
And look, I'm not trying to like bring up that. I'm not even going to say what I was going to say, but drama. We'll say drama in a social media era.
In the social media era with his children,
a lot of outside noise and attention brought to it.
Yeah.
And then he's talking about his cheeseburgers and whatnot, and it would be like, dude, like people would be sick of it. Like this in today's world. So,
and I think that goes for any coach. I don't know if any coach will be liked unless they win every single fucking football game here. It's a tough town to coach in. That's what it comes down to.
It's very
true. I think I'm trying to put it into perspective for Nick Sirianni. It's like, maybe he's not our favorite character, right? Like when he's really on his shit and showing who he is, maybe it's not our favorite, but it works.
Yep.
His players love him. it works. They've gotten to higher places.
Guy in the room, hand up. Like I was wrong. Like I thought he lost the locker room. And there might be some truth to that with some of the players from last year.
Maybe he fought through and got it back, which would make it even better of an experience, quite honestly. So
like CJ Gardner-Johnson leaves here disgruntled, doesn't like Howie, doesn't like the organization. Now there's questions about Nick. Comes back, him and Nick are embracing each other after the NFC Championship game. Him and Howie are embracing. Like there is that culture here, man. Speaking of that culture, it was here 2 years ago, and we played this very head coach we're talking about. We played this quarterback. We played this tight end. We played this team.
Yeah.
This Eagles team isn't just better than 2022. This Eagles team, to me, Scotty, is otherworldly better. And let me try to work my way through this, because if you go by the quarterback, the same quarterback's here, and you can argue in 2022, you can't even argue, he was way better in 2022 statistically and eye test wise, right? You had the tight end, you had the 2 wide receivers. Offensive line, you could probably say was better in 2022. I mean, it's the same, except Jason Kelce was here instead of Cam Jurgens, and Isaac Seumalo was playing right guard instead of Mekhi Becton. You could argue it's better. It probably is. So that's better. And everything else is the same, except for one thing. Defensively, all the numbers in the world are there. 73 sacks, I believe, in that season as a group. Darius Slay was a Pro Bowler. First team All-Pro. CJ Gardner-Johnson was here. James Bradbury had a Pro Bowl type of year. Hassan Reddick was a Pro Bowler and a first team All-Pro. Fletcher Cox was still here. Like that defense, that team was very, 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 very good. Very similar in a lot of areas to this roster. This team's so much better. It's so much better. 26A just gives you, like, that's when we talk about this game later on in the week, and when we flash back to 2022, that is going to be single-handedly, arguably, the biggest difference. Oh, you had 1,000+ yard rusher in Miles Sanders. He had 16 yards in the Super Bowl. He broke his wrist. Kenny G was getting carries. Boston Scott was on the field. That is so, so different. And I will take this defense over that 73 sack defense, the Darius Slay first team All-Pro year. I will take this unit every single day and twice on Sundays over that unit. This team, to me, Scotty, is so much more, like, you know, I don't know how you judge it, but they're just more physical. We've talked about it all year. They bully people. They stick to their identity, and we had an identity that year, but this is different, man. This team is so much better. They know what they want to do. They know they're better than you, and you can't stop it, and I think it plays out that way on Sunday. And if they're able to accomplish it, yes, single-handedly, this Philadelphia Eagles team in 2024 is the greatest Eagles team of all time, and it won't even be a question.
Yeah, I do agree, man. When you look at that 22 team, looking back on it, and this is what drives my hesitation. I just don't want to jump the gun, I guess. Because how confident was I going into that Super Bowl against Patrick Mahomes and the Chiefs? And how confident was I in the defense specifically? Do you know what I mean? I was very confident that we were going to go out there. We were going to be able to get Patrick Mahomes on his back. Hassan Reddick was going to get after the quarterback. And those guys went out there and looked like a complete shell of themselves.
Yep.
Now, I will say they did show signs of it throughout that season that maybe we just turned an eye to, right? You get the record-breaking sack numbers, and maybe you start to ignore some of the other things.
The passing defense was a concern.
Yeah, for sure. So it makes me draw a little bit of hesitation, just because if this defense comes out and gives up 30-plus points to Mahomes this weekend, what's the difference?
Right.
I mean, if CGJ goes out there, Reed Blankenship goes out there, and they forget their assignments, right, with these tight ends, I'm going to be going back and I'm going to be revisiting some of these combos. But right now to follow up on what you said, that was my pessimistic view, right? That was me just wondering, or maybe considering the what Mahomes and that Kansas City Chiefs team presents. But on the other side of it, like I said, that other team showed signs throughout that season. If we paid attention, they weren't a great run defense. They weren't a great third down defense. Whereas this defense is almost better in the areas that defense wasn't. Whereas they're not as good as at getting to the quarterback per se, right?
For sure.
But they're way better on third down. Sure. They're way better in pass coverage. They're way better at stopping the run. I think there's a lot more versatility with this unit. I think you have a lot more options that you can try.
And
if something goes wrong.
I'm trying to recall, we played one less game in 22 because we had the bye. Then we had the Giants come to town, and then it was the Purdy injury and the 49ers, right? I'm trying to recall how those two games played out before the Super Bowl. But this defense is much more opportunistic too, dude. And they're coached differently. And like when I said physical, like I think we went through it on Friday. They have to be averaging 3+ turnovers a game in the 3 playoff games so far. Yeah. That defense wasn't doing that. And the sack numbers started to disappear as the postseason went on compared to the regular season. And the pass defense, it was what? It was the same thing as Schwartz in 17. What did we hate? The sticks defense. That's what every fan would scream about at their television. The sticks defense. You don't get that this year. You have more talented players on the back end compared to that defense. Yeah, they don't get after the quarterback as well, but they're so much more opportunistic. I go to that Zach Bond and Cooper DeJean turnover on De'Ami Brown, man. All of Zach Bond's forced fumbles. They go after the football every time. And it's not in a stupid way where they're missing tackle after tackle because they're trying to strip somebody. No, they're wrapping you up and they're getting their hands on the football. There's a numbers game to it. There's multiple guys flying to the ball. They're so much more opportunistic as well than that 22 defense. So, yeah, I think I would agree. I think that 22 defense stood out in the front 7, in the front 4, way more in terms of production and numbers than anything else. But this Eagles defense does everything else at a higher level than that defense did.
And they get after the quarterback good enough.
Right. And that's what all those sacks.
Yeah. And it did nothing
in the
for
Super Bowl.
Did nothing.
And I agree with D-Rab. Like that field was terrible. Like we understand the turf, everything.
It was.
But that
KC
all those
was able to win.
That was the problem in that Super Bowl, right? All those sacks disappeared, and they didn't do anything else at a high level. This team does.
No, I completely agree with you regarding this defense. This defense just looks a lot more sturdy. There's not as many cracks in this defense going into this game. They got to come out and prove it, man. But I did want to ask you this because you start to think about that last Super Bowl matchup. You do got to think about it from the other side as well with Kansas City and what they were presenting at that time versus at this time, right? And is their team better now than what it was then? Correct. It's really weird, right? It's really weird because you do have guys like Kareem Hunt, DeAndre Hopkins, who carry like name value historically, but obviously aren't at the top of their games. You definitely would say Travis Kelce was better in 22 than he is now. Yeah. Was Mahomes better in 22 than what he was this year? Yes. Doesn't really matter. He can obviously show up as 22 Mahomes if he needs to in the big game. I'm not doubting that. But these are all questions I asked myself. The one thing I will throw to you, just my instant thought when thinking about it was, yes, they don't have the crazy weapons like outside of Kelce and Noah Gray. I'll give him some credit. They got different guys worthy that can make some plays. When you look back at that 22 Chiefs team, who was wide receiver 1 for them?
It was Juju.
Juju Smith-Schuster, right?
Yeah, it was
so
Juju
it's like,
and Marquez Valdez-Scantling were their 2 wide receivers.
So it's like they don't need AJ Brown and Smitty to necessarily beat us. So I don't know. How would you ultimately measure it out? How do you view this Chiefs team versus that 22 team, man?
Yeah, I think it's so difficult, and we said all year, when are we going to learn the lesson of not betting against Patrick Mahomes? Unfortunately, I will be betting against Patrick Mahomes this Sunday. But I don't want to get ahead of myself, and it just feels like you're catching this team at the right trajectory. This Eagles team is better, and the Chiefs team is coming this way in terms of age, in terms of some of their talent. Like you said, dude, Mahomes that year threw for 5,200 yards, 41 touchdowns, and 12 interceptions. That's one of only 7 quarterbacks to throw for over 5,000 yards in a season. So he had literally in 2022 probably one of his greatest years statistically, right? Travis Kelce that year went for almost 1,400 yards, 110 catches, and 12 receiving touchdowns. Travis Kelce was on a different level. Yeah. That year, they also had Orlando Brown. And Orlando Brown, Joe Thuney, and Creed Humphrey were all Pro Bowlers and first-team All-Pros. That offensive line is not producing like it did in 2022. Mahomes, again, you just know, or never know, I guess, in terms of, oh, well, he hasn't looked the same this year. Oh, okay. Well, I'm not going to get ahead of myself there. The Kelce thing, I think, is real. I'm not scared to try to stop Pacheco and Kareem Hunt in the running game. They're more speedy. They're a little bit more dangerous at the wide receiver position. They have a guy in D-Hop who's one of the greatest of all times. Xavier Worthy as a rookie with that speed. They still have their number one in Juju. So they have more guys.
Having an annoying catch in this game.
For sure. Yeah. They definitely have more guys at the wide receiver spot, but the line is not as good. Kelsey's older and not as productive. Mahomes did not have the same type of season. The rushing attack is Pacheco, and Pacheco add in Kareem Hunt this year, so it's basically the same. And then the defense. I mean, Juwan Thornhill and L'Jarius Sneed were there that year.
Right.
They're not there this year.
Right.
And then you have some of the same, right? You have Leo Chenal, Trent McDuffie, and Justin Reed are also there. Chris Jones, Frank Clark, not there. So this Chiefs team is not as good and not as loaded as it was. They're a little bit older. And it's weird, man, right? Because they're hungry to get the three-peat. So it's a stupid thing to talk about fatigue or, whatever. You got one team that has a Super Bowl loss taste in their mouth in Jalen Hurts and Nick Sirianni, and you have another team that's done nothing but win as they get older. It'll be interesting to see how it plays out. I'm not going to say something stupid and say the Chiefs aren't as hungry as the Eagles. No, they're going for literal history. They're hungry, trust me. Winning never gets old.
Look.
But one team has lost in 2 years, the other team hasn't.
I'm interested to know who the Chiefs went through that season in the AFC to get to the Super Bowl.
2 years ago?
Yeah.
Well, the
reason I say that
they had to have beaten the Bills because last year they were the 2 seed and had to go to Baltimore in the AFC Championship. 2 years ago, it ran through Arrowhead, so they had a bye. Did they play? Why do I remember them playing Jacksonville the day we played the Giants?
Maybe
we played the Giants in the divisional round at nighttime on a Saturday. I'm pretty sure they played the
after Trevor Lawrence beat the Chargers.
Yeah, I think they played the Jags, and then I'm pretty sure Buffalo missed a field goal or lost in overtime in the AFC Championship.
It's interesting. I'm just looking at who they played on the way this time. You had the Texans in Kansas City, obviously. Buffalo in Kansas City. Buffalo loses 32-29. They beat the Texans 23-14. So just measuring it out. But at the end of the day, it's what what Pastor Rem said earlier in the show. It's just a matter of lining that shit up. It really doesn't matter historically. That's the thing. That's the thing about this week, man. And it's the thing about like off season that's coming. It's this thing about predictions, especially at this point in the season. It don't matter what we sit here and say. Right. They're going to line this shit up, and we're going to find out very soon.
They played the Jags in the divisional round, and they beat the Bengals by 3 in the AFC Championship game that year.
The Bengals. Yeah. And that was the year before the Bengals went to, or the year after the Bengals went to the Super Bowl.
Yes.
Right?
Yes. Yeah.
Lost to the Rams. Yeah. So makes sense. I was just trying to gauge, just the way the Chiefs are playing right now. It's like you said, you look at the Eagles last weekend against a hot Washington Commanders team, right? Or maybe that was even not this past weekend, but the weekend before that. And they blow them out by multiple possessions. So it's just a different trajectory. But once again, whoever shows up on Sunday evening, man, it's going to be fun. I can't wait to dig into it a little bit deeper with you, my man, and get into those keys to victory in this one, because the matchups across the board there's going to be some crazy matchups for sure.
Yeah, but it's going to be a lot of fun to continue to talk about
what a
throughout
week.
the week. What a week. Back at it 2 times in 3 years.
Do we
guys, good?
Do we trade Paul George? I wanted to ask you that before we get out of here.
I'm conflicted, bro. I am conflicted. I think part of you says yes if you can get out of that contract. Like with the way it's looking, part of you wants to say yes. But this was the first time in how long we've been able to attract like the premier guy on the market. And it's not playing out the way we want. But that's for a lot of reasons.
Yeah.
In an ugly season, I don't know that like Paul George is like the number 2 issue, right? Like there's a lot of reasons why this season has been the way it is. And, 4 months after acquiring one of the biggest free agents we've ever acquired, we're going to ship him off. So I don't know. I'm indifferent on it. I'm indifferent on it.
I feel that it's just one of those things where I can say whatever I want to say right now, but at the end of the day, if after the trade deadline, Jimmy Butler was on the Sixers and Paul George wasn't, I might be a happier guy. And once again, it's not to like totally disrespect Paul George. One, it started out horribly, to your point of what you said. 2, for me, man, it's the podcasting while losing and while not playing basketball. I really don't like that shit. That's kind of a side point, nonetheless. The other point is Jimmy has gotten his team to the championship without an Embiid, without a Maxey beside him. So what can he do if those guys are there? But yeah, I'm not going to sit here and bang the table to trade Paul George either. I'm not going to disrespect the guy. I do just think Jimmy is probably more valuable than Paul George is. But yeah, no. Sixers playing some better basketball, man. If we can just get Embiid on the
court. They are, but if you thought the Sacramento loss was bad, can I introduce you to one worse last night? It's hard because, the Stars played in that game,
you should have never been leading it, but when you're up 20 plus points, you kind of need to win the basketball.
I'm pretty sure, like, I saw Ricky Council go like this at one point after a dunk or something, so
it was embarrassing. Yeah, it was still embarrassing. Because it was like a flip of the switch, like Boston, like we're back in like game 6, remember? You know what I mean? Like it's not the same at all, but it was the same in the sense of like flipping a switch in the fourth quarter, hitting like 10 threes, and then the game's all of a sudden over. And you don't even have a chance to win at the end. You know what I mean? Like it got flipped in reverse so bad that we were down, multiple possessions at the end to where you don't even get a last second shot. The fact that Boston can flip the switch like that is
pretty gross. Pretty gross to watch Jason Tatum and Sam Hauser and Derek White just not miss from beyond the arc in the fourth quarter was disgusting and gave me flashbacks to game 6, which obviously hurt a whole hell of a lot more worse than that did. But we'll see, man. And to Marsh's point, I don't know. Mark Cuban doesn't know what the Mavericks are doing. The actual GM does not know what the Mavericks are doing.
Just odd.
No, like it might be the worst trade in sports history.
I know people are trying to. They're trying to work their brains around it to like make it sound all right. It's not.
Now it's his conditioning and the beers he drinks.
And like Anthony Davis in his fit. And it's like, dude, get the fuck out of here. Like I'm not here.
Age 35 Anthony Davis instead of Luka who, mind you, just took you to the chip last year. So that conditioning you're talking about, those beers he likes to drink, he just took you to the chip last year.
They turned it into Embiid. Like, did you see that quote? How it turned into Embiid? Like, how does Embiid get involved in the Mavs trading
as much as Joel Embiid has frustrated me and annoyed me recently, like, he does just catch every stray known to man. Like,
for no
has nothing to do with
reason.
him, and somehow he's being put in the clip and the headlines of it all. So
it's amazing.
It's pretty crazy, man. But we'll see if they can start to win more basketball games. Paul George and Joel hopefully playing it by the end of this week. So
hopefully
we'll see how long that lasts. The Phillies, the buses left today to go to Clearwater. Spring training, the Grapefruit League is around the corner. But guys, that's going to do it for this Monday edition of the Phaithful Fanatic Show. We'll be on and off throughout the week, so stay tuned.
Yes, sir.
Check us out on Twitter at DSM_Media. That's where we're most active. And then make sure to subscribe to the YouTube channel. As always, it's the best and only spot to get you your thoughts and comments pulled up on the screen here with us. For myself, for Scotty, for DSM, have a great rest of your Monday.
Go Birds.